Good evening, everyone. I bet that President Trump wishes he would have had this much noise in the room the other day. But it's lovely to see all of you here, and welcome to the October Cornerstones event. I'm Nancy Thompson, and I'm co-chair of the Cornerstones Steering Committee. And our guest of honor tonight is Professor John Clum. He'll be discussing the 1941 film by Frank Capra, Meet John Doe, a movie that, as John describes it, captures the anxieties of Americans just before World War II and resonates with many of our own anxieties today. Now it's time to listen to our guest, John Clum. He is the Duke University Emeritus Professor of Theater and English. He taught at Duke for more than 40 years. He has directed nearly 100 productions, ranging from Shakespeare to premieres of contemporary plays to opera and musicals. John has written 11 books and 75 essays on modern and contemporary drama, musical theater, film, and television. He currently teaches Stage and Screen, a weekly class offered by the Center for Life and Learning here at Fourth Church. And it's a wonderful class. It's weekly. It's if we had to pay for it, I mean really pay for it, I'd say I'd pay $150 to come to this class. Per class. So
you can
anyway.
Pay that directly to me if you want.
Okay, John, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me? Okay. All right. Can everybody hear me? Good. The mic is working. All right. When I was asked to speak to Cornerstones, first thought was I was going to do something on movies that speak to our time. And then I realized that there weren't a lot of them. And the ones that there are extremely depressing, like Civil War, which is a brilliant film, but it's very hard going. So I thought, well, let's look back and see a movie that speaks to our time and spoke to its own time and may speak to some things about our own time as well. And I thought about Frank Capra's Meet John Doe, which was made in 1941. It was actually the last successful movie Frank Capra made. And the next big movie he made after the war, because he worked for the government during the war, was a film called A Wonderful Life, which in its own day was a flop. And quite a disappointment to him. You never know what's going to happen to a movie in time, particularly with television. So anyway, Meet John Doe to me was a film that kind of reflected what was going on. And 1940, 1941, it was a very strange time for this country. Not only because I was born in 1941, but because until December 7th, the country had great tensions about its role in the world. And those tensions led to anxiety. The country also was still in the Depression, just coming out of the Depression to some extent. So to me, Meet John Doe reflected the anxieties that we're living with in our own time to some extent. We're living in a critically divided nation. There is fear on the part of people, no matter what side of the political spectrum they're on, that somebody's going to take over the country in a way they don't like. Fear of authoritarianism and fear of plutocracy. There is anxiety on both sides of the political spectrum about the erosion of free speech. There are anxieties about gender, about the role of women. If one heard our Secretary of Defense's speech this week, it was interesting. And there are anxieties about the place of religion, religious orthodoxy versus secularism. All these kinds of weird splits in our time, some of which I think link to mass media. And Meet John Doe, like many films of its time, was to some extent a film about the influence of mass media. And mass media meant something different then than it means now. I mean, now mass media really has something to do with cultural fragmentation, right? We don't share cultural events the way we did. I was thinking when I put this together, remember the last episode of MASH when everybody in the country watched it and talked about it. And we don't have that anymore. People depend on the internet and they watch on the internet things that tell them what they already want to believe and nothing else. The most powerful men in our country are Silicon Valley people. Television still exists, but cable television and network television, which is where we had a shared culture, are waning. And if we look back into 1941, when Meet John Doe was made, Meet John Doe was a time in which people shared cultural experiences. People in communities all read that community's newspaper. And newspapers were a very important way of sharing information across a community. And a lot of the films of the 1930s and into the 1940s were films about heroic journalists. The Front Page, which was a hit Broadway play, which was made into a movie 5 times in the 1930s with different titles and so on. A film about heroic reporters. Even a great comedy like It Happened One Night, Clark Gable plays a newspaper reporter. That's what a hero is in a comedy. And Meet John Doe and Citizen Kane, produced the same year, both present newspaper owners, but as threats to democracy. And it's very interesting. And a lot of it is a reaction to the power of William Randolph Hearst, who is, of course, sort of the subject of Citizen Kane, and in a way, sort of the villain in Meet John Doe. And then there is radio. Radio only started, as you probably know, in the 1920s. Radio was young in 1941. In Meet John Doe becomes a national hero through one radio speech. So many of the people in the country listened to that one program, and it was assumed that that could happen, that you could change national attitudes through one speech. And movies were a mass medium. 2/3 of Americans in 1940 attended movies regularly. That meant they left their living room and went to a theater to attend a movie. So 1941, beginning of FDR's third term as president, which scared a lot of people. Europe was at war. America was still a country that believed in isolation, that to a great many people in America felt that what was going on in Europe had nothing to do with them. That changed when the Japanese invaded us, Pearl Harbor. The country was full of America First rallies. Sound familiar? Charles Lindbergh was a big hero of the America First movement. And it was interesting that that movement blamed the war in Europe on Franklin Delano Roosevelt, interesting, the British, and the Jews. So this was kind of going on. And there was strange support in America on the part of a lot of people for what was going on in Germany. Charles Lindbergh praised Hitler in his speeches. In 1939, there was a Nazi rally in Madison Square Garden. 20,000 people attended. Fortunately, that's the bad news. Here's a picture of the rally. Don't you like George Washington there? He would have loved it. The good news is that 100,000 people outside were protesting it. So again, a little bit of a split going on. And then there's a picture of all the people outside and the mounted police. One of the most popular radio personalities in the 1930s, leading up to World War II, was a Catholic priest by the name of Father Charles Coughlin, came out of Detroit. And Coughlin's radio show was one of the most popular radio shows in the country. 1/3 of Americans listened to Father Coughlin on Sunday nights. He was a Nazi sympathizer. He was anti-Semitic, violently against the New Deal and against the American involvement in the European War. And a lot of the businessmen were kind of interestingly placed politically. William Randolph Hearst, again, the most powerful media magnate in America, the Rupert Murdoch of his day, ordered his papers and radio stations in the late 1930s to praise Hitler. So, weird time, still a man's world, limited career paths for women. World War II would bring major changes in the roles of women, temporarily, as you know, and a marriage was supposed to be the goal. Now, where was Hollywood in all this? Hollywood was the great mass entertainment. Movie theaters held thousands of people, and it was something everybody did. And Hollywood, at that point, really supported what might be called a kind of populism, a celebration of the people, a demonization of the wealthy and powerful, unless they own movie studios. And the rich and powerful were often, even in comedies, the butt of the jokes, or in serious films, the villains. Indeed, later on in the McCarthy era, a lot of Hollywood people were going to be brought in and investigated for their leftist attitudes in films around the time of Meet John Doe. Robert Riskin, who wrote Meet John Doe, was brought up and investigated. Frank Capra, who directed John Doe, was one of the people that testified for the House Un-American Activities Committee. Lost a lot of popularity for that. The other thing was that Hollywood had a great ability to use what I call secular Christianity. Religious symbolism and even Christian symbolism to show the power and goodness of the people. One of the interesting things about Meet John Doe is how much Christian symbolism there is in this film. That is a crucial, very crucial part of it. So this is a little bit of the climate in which Meet John Doe was created. Tensions in the country between political points of view, tensions in the country about the war. And Meet John Doe was created by a team of men, a writer by the name of Robert Riskin and a director by the name of Frank Capra. And Frank Capra was one of those guys who had been in films since almost, silent movies. Those were the days in which the real maverick days of Hollywood, you could go to a studio in the early 1920s and say, I want a job, and end up being a director in 5 years. Because the way you learned your trade was not to get an MFA from University of Southern California. The way you got your trade in movies was to apprentice to whoever was working in the movies, which is what Capra did. And in the late 1930s, he made this string of hits. It Happened One Night, the great comedy, You Can't Take It With You, Mr. Deeds Goes to Town with Gary Cooper, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington with Jimmy Stewart, and Meet John Doe with Gary Cooper again. This was his great period of time that he never recreated. Most of these films were made for Columbia Pictures. Meet John Doe was the only film he produced sort of independently of the studio system, which he never did again. Frank Capra was quite conservative politically, but his main screenwriter for all these films, for 8 of Capra's films, was a guy by the name of Robert Riskin, who was quite a lefty. So one of the things you see in Capra movies is this really interesting tension between the script and the director's vision. And it's one of the things that those of us who look at these films find very, very fascinating. Now, Meet John Doe is what you might call a serious parable. And it would probably be a greater film than it was if Capra avoided his tendency to throw slapstick in places where it didn't quite work. But it is a fascinating film to watch. Like Mr. Deeds Goes to Town and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and to some extent It Happened One Night, Meet John Doe is a film about moral education. It's a normal guy, who learns that he has to take a stand and has to do something heroic. And the circumstances of his doing it are very unusual, but it follows the arc that Frank Capra films always follow, which is you start with this naive, nice guy, and this nice guy, through various things, rises to a position of power through sort of circumstances outside his control. If you know Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, he's appointed senator. He never runs for it, he's appointed it. And he's appointed because they think he's so dumb he'll do what the people in power want him to do. John Doe in Meet John Doe is kind of hired to pretend to be somebody he isn't. But from that, this person rises to a position of importance, senator, in John Doe's case, a kind of media celebrity, national hero, and then realizes that he is being used by powerful people with kind of fascist ideology and tendencies. And when he goes to reveal what he knows about those people, they engineer, through their control of the media, a public humiliation of the person, but the person ultimately emerges triumphant. Not quite always in the most credible ways. But this is the arc of these movies. And it's the arc, to some extent, of Meet John Doe. But what's also in the background of the film, and particularly this film, is the people. And here we get into populism again, the American people, because it's the American people that really rise up and do the good things that John Doe suggests they do. The films are skeptical about politicians, and we also see in Capra's films, Capra and Riskin's films, that a man and a woman go through parallel educations, moral educations, and are going to end up together. And they are always up against people in power who control the media, who do everything they can to stop the truth from getting out. And the films, in some ways, also are there, as 1930s movies tend to be, to teach women their proper role. And it's interesting, particularly how that works with Meet John Doe, as I'll talk about in a minute. So all these things come up. Now, Meet John Doe establishes its populism in the very first minutes of the film. It's one of those films in which you watch what's going on under the titles. And what's going on under the titles is this panorama of American people. It's the kind of film you'd expect a kind of Soviet director to make, crowds of people doing things, celebration of the people themselves. I thought I'd show you this opening, and the music for this opening is all Americana, famous American tunes, right, to establish it. Oops, I've got to go back on this to the beginning. There we go. Oop. Now I'm going to stop this a minute because I'm going to go on. The next thing you see after the titles is a newspaper, the plaque of a newspaper. And it's the Free Press. And you watch free being jackhammered off the sign. Very subtle, right? But it shows you two things. One, this is a film about the media in part and what the media can do. And it's a film about somebody who is taking away the freedom or wants to take away the freedom of the media because this newspaper has been taken over by D.B. Norton, our villain, played as usual in a Capra film by Edward Arnold, who always plays the villain in the Capra film. So if you see him, you know what you're supposed to think of him. So I'll just go. Get it? So there you go. You know what's going to happen in the film, and in the next few minutes, you see all the people, a whole bunch of people being fired from the newspaper, and which is the first thing a person taking over something like that does, of course, fire everybody. And one of the people that he fires is our heroine, Ann Mitchell. And you know that she's the heroine because it's Barbara Stanwyck, of course. Who was one of the biggest stars of the period. To my mind, one of the greatest actresses, the most versatile of the big movie stars. She could do comedy, she could do tragedy, she could do sultry, she could do whatever was needed to do. And Ann Mitchell here's you get in the interesting gender politics of this film. Ann Mitchell supports her family. Her father has died, he's a doctor, he has died, and she is supporting her mother and her younger sister. So she's the breadwinner of the family. Not always usual at this period of time. And she's fired from her job at the newspaper, and she's very fiercely ambitious, and she wants money to support her family. So she dreams up this idea that gets her job back. And it's the idea that she's going to create a letter to the editor written by this guy by the name of John Doe. And John Doe claims in the letter that he's going to jump off the highest building in the town on Christmas Eve. Christian symbolism is about to begin. He's going to jump off the tower on Christmas Eve in protest for kind of the cruelty of society. And the newspaper buys this job, buys her idea, prints the article, and she has another problem. It becomes so successful, she has to write more and more of these. Where does she get the idea for these articles? Her father's diary. So really, she's writing, this is sort of a double ventriloquism, as you see in this film. She's writing stuff her father wrote in the name not of herself, but of John Doe, right? And they have to find somebody to be John Doe. It becomes so popular. And they audition a bunch of people, and they get they get Gary Cooper, of all people, to be John Doe. So John Doe's job is to represent her words, which are really her father's words. Got her? And voice them. John Doe, of course, is a baseball player. And he's a baseball player who has a bad arm, and so he has no job, and he's hoping that he can ever get enough money together to get the arm fixed. He's what they called in the time a hobo. He travels around on trains. He travels with a guy played by Walter Brennan called the Colonel, who is against money, who's totally a kind of anti-capitalist. And he wins the contest to be John Doe, and what he has to do is go on network radio and give a speech that Anne wrote. And the speech is this amazing kind of love thy neighbor speech. It's kind of everybody should act according, although they don't exactly say this at this point, according to Christian principles. And again in the film, it is brought up that the first John Doe is Jesus. And it's never exactly mentioned, but you know who they mean, right? And remember, this John Doe is going to have to be crucified, right, on Christmas Eve. Eventually, we'll get to that. So he gives this radio speech, and I'll just give you the end of this speech, which is a giant success. And it's a great piece of acting by Gary Cooper, because when he starts the speech, he's awful. And then he gets totally wound up in her words, which are her father's words, right? And gets better and better delivering the speech.
Ladies and gentlemen,
I want to get...
retreated from Moscow with Napoleon.
I want to get... Okay.
They've started a lot of talk about free people going soft, that we can't take it. That's a lot of hooey. That free people can beat the world at anything, from war to tiddlywinks, if we all pull in the same direction. I know a lot of you are saying, what can I do? I'm just a little punk. I don't count. Well, you're dead wrong. The little punks have always counted, because in the long run, the character of a country is the sum total of the character of its little punks. But we've all got to get in there and pitch. We can't win the old ball game unless we have teamwork. And that's where every John Doe comes in. It's up to him to get together with his teammate. And your teammate, my friend, is the guy next door to you. Your neighbor. He's a terribly important guy, that guy next door. You're going to need him, and he's going to need you, so look him up. If he's sick, call on him. If he's hungry, feed him. If he's out of a job, find him one. To most of you, your neighbor is a stranger, a guy with a barking dog and a high fence around it. Now, you can't be a stranger to any guy that's on your own team. So tear down the fence that separates you. Tear down the fence, and you'll tear down a lot of hates and prejudices. Tear down all the fences in the country, and you'll really have teamwork. I know a lot of you are saying to yourselves, he's asking for a miracle to happen. He's expecting people to change all of a sudden. Well, you're wrong. It's no miracle. It's no miracle because I see it happen once every year. And so do you. At Christmas time. There's something swell about the spirit of Christmas, to see what it does to people, all kinds of people. Now, why can't that spirit, that same warm Christmas spirit, last the whole year round? Gosh, if it ever did, if each and every John Doe would make that spirit last 365 days out of the year, we'd develop such a strength, we'd create such a tidal wave of goodwill that no human force could stand against it. Yes, sir, my friends, the meek can only inherit the earth when the John Does start loving their neighbors. You better start right now. Don't wait till the game is called on account of darkness. John Doe, you're the hope of the world. Ladies and gentlemen.
So, from that speech that John Doe gives, all over the country, people start John Doe clubs. And these John Doe clubs become just what he asked for, kind of love thy neighbor clubs. People find out who lives next door. If they're poor, they feed them, they get them jobs, they do everything that needs to do to make everybody happy. So it's an interesting collective movement that starts nationwide because of the speech that Anne wrote for him. Now, what you saw in the clip is during the speech, Edward Arnold, our villain, D.B. Norton, is listening to the speech, watching its reaction to his servants, and realizing, aha, I can use this. And so you're watching this guy in this mansion, this fat cat, which he literally is, with his pince-nez, which is a clear sign, of someone very exclusive, right? Not regular glasses, he wears a pince-nez. So you get all the iconography of Edward Arnold in this. And indeed, just about the only black people you see in this film are Edward Arnold's servants, D.B. Norton's servants. So the John Doe, after he gives the speech, John Willoughby, which is his real name, runs off and disappears. He doesn't want to be bothered. It's too powerful for him. And of course, he goes to this small town, and everybody knows who he is. And he's roped back into being the John Doe, much as he would like to get away from being John Doe. He gets roped into it by this whole group of people who tell him all the good things that he's doing. And so the film, these are the good people. The film's about the people, not the government. One thing interesting about John Doe clubs, politicians cannot join them. People catch on early. But they're not aware how much they can still be picked up and used, because D.B. Norton starts funding the John Doe clubs. And his idea is going to be that he's going to use them to get to be president of the United States. Now, what we know about D.B. Norton at this time is he has his own private army, which is a little scary. And he talks about how people have to be ruled with an iron fist. I mean, he's got all this not very nice language about the people. And it's clear what he wants to put in is a very tough fascist government. And that he has brought together media people, millionaires, and so on, to be part of this movement to win the presidency. And it's the only way he is interested in the John Doe movement. But he takes control of the John Doe movement. He owns the newspapers. Remember the free press that is not free anymore? He owns the newspapers and so on. And he's set for his pattern of what this is to be. And he kind of takes over Anne, who's been writing all this stuff. And suddenly she's at dinners at his house. And suddenly she's wearing a mink coat. And suddenly she has a diamond bracelet. And we see Anne being bought by all the money and largesse that D.B. Norton has for her, and being corrupted by it, to the point that she writes a speech. There's to be this big meeting of all the John Doe people in the country, and she writes the speech in which he's supposed to tell the country to vote for D.B. Norton as President of the United States. He finds out about this, and he confronts Norton. And what's interesting about this scene is, remember, up to this point in the film, just about everything John Doe has said has been written by somebody else, scripted for him to do. And finally, when he confronts D.B. Norton, he speaks in his own voice. And that's, of course, the first sign of, a hero when you get your own voice. So here's D.B. Norton, John going into D.B. Norton's house.
John, I'm so glad to see you. I was terribly worried.
Did you write this?
Yes, I did, John, but I had no idea what was going on.
You didn't?
No.
That's a swell bracelet you're wearing. John, why aren't you at the convention? Is there anything wrong? No, nothing's wrong. Everything's fine. So there's going to be a new order of things, huh? Everybody's going to cut himself a nice fat slice of the John Does, eh? You forgot one detail, Mr. Big Shot. You forgot me, the prize stooge of the world. Why, if you or anybody else thinks he's going to use the John Doe clubs for his own rotten purpose, he's going to have to do it over my dead body.
Well, hold on a minute, young man. Hold on. That's rather big talk. I started the John Doe clubs with my money, and I'll decide whether or not they're being properly used.
No, you won't. You're through deciding anything. And what's more, I'm going down to that convention and I'm going to tell those people exactly what you and all your fine feathered friends here are trying to cook up for them. And I'm going to say it in my own words this time.
Stop worrying. All I do.
Wait a minute, fella. My uncle wants to talk to you.
Listen to me, my son. Before you lose your head completely, may I remind you that I picked you up out of the gutter and I can throw you right back there again? You've got a nerve accusing people of things. These gentlemen and I know what's best for the John Does of America, regardless of what tramps like you think. Get off that righteous horse of yours and come to your senses. You're the fake. We believe in what we're doing. You're the one that was paid the 30 pieces of silver. Have you forgotten that? Well, I haven't. You're a fake John Doe, and I can prove it. You're the big hero that's supposed to jump off tall buildings and things. Do you remember? What do you suppose your precious John Does will say when they find out that you never had any intention of doing it, that you were being paid to say so? You're lucky they didn't run you out of the country. And with the newspapers and the radio stations that these gentlemen control, we can kill the John Doe movement deader than a doornail will do it too the moment you step out of line. Now, if you still want to go to that convention and shoot your trap off, you go ahead and do it.
You mean to tell...
Whoops.
Try to kill the John Doe movement if you can't use it to get what you want?
You bet your bottom dollar we would.
It's interesting. One thing is you might notice is the way they use dialects as a way of separating the good guy, normal American guy, from the bad guy. Edward Arnold's mid-Atlantic plummy accent and Gary Cooper's Midwestern accent, right? All interesting iconography. So John Doe goes to this big convention of the John Doe people in a baseball stadium. It is, of course, pouring rain, so it can look really sad. And John Doe gets up to tell the truth, but Norton gets there first and already has got newspapers out saying he's a fraud, and the people turn against him. Norton cuts the microphone cord, so he is silenced, and the people turn against him. And it's interesting, again, in the film, as I said, Jesus is mentioned as the first John Doe, and one has to go through trials and be betrayed and metaphorically crucified before one can triumph. And it also says something about the public, and and the ways in which the film has a kind of weird attitude. A film has a kind of weird attitude about the people. On one hand, it's all about the kindness and generosity of the people when they're in the right direction. But it's also true, and this is a little bit of the pessimism of the film, people in this film can be easily manipulated. Norton can turn them against him as quickly as they have been for him. It only takes the power of communication to control the crowds. And there's an interesting comment in the best book about Frank Capra, Joseph McBride's book, in which he says, while preaching the theme of love thy neighbor and cloaking its characters in explicit Christian symbolism, Meet John Doe also shows a deep distrust of the common man, portraying the public as mindless, fickle, and dangerously malleable. So anyway, what can John Doe do? He can write a letter to the paper saying that he indeed is going to jump off the roof of the building on Christmas Eve. And here comes Frank Capra's problem. Before this film was released fully, it went through 5 different endings that Capra and Robert Riskin couldn't decide the ending. Capra's preferred ending was that John Doe jump off the building. And the crowd below is jeering, trying to egg him on to jump off the building. Really depressing ending. They tried that in previews and the audience said, no, this is no good. And Capra realized that Gary Cooper does not die in his movies. They had a thing in which Norton recanted and admitted what he was doing. That didn't make a lot of sense. And so they ended up with, after 4 tries, with the ending that you see if you see this film on Netflix or something. And it's a film in which John Doe is up on the roof, Christmas Eve. It is snowing, of course, and 3 groups of people try to talk him out of killing himself. Norton, because Norton says it won't do you any good, I'm going to make sure the papers don't report this, you're going to die in a pauper's grave, forget it. But it also suggests that Norton is scared of the power of his doing it. Anne, who comes up, talks about how she loves him and he can't die, and after all, talks again about the first John Doe on Christmas Eve. And then all those people that turned against him show up on the roof and tell him, well, they made a mistake and they want him. And he goes off, leaves with them, but he also leaves with them. Anne gets so hysterical about the thought of his dying, she faints, and he leaves carrying Anne in his arms. So proper gender order has been established at the end of the film. And it's a very interesting moment, and the last line up there is the line of an old journalist who says to Norton, there you are, Norton, the people try and lick that the people have ultimately done the right thing. And that's the end of the film. And I want to show you just a little bit of this last scene of the film. I'm going to cut into it because it's quite long.
No time to give up. You and I, John, we... Oh, no. No, John. If you die, I want to die too. Oh, I love you.
Not very convincing feint, I must.
Mr. Doe, you don't have to. We're with you, Mr. Doe. We just lost our heads and acted like a mob.
What Bert's trying to say is that we need you, Mr. Doe. There were a lot of us that didn't believe what that man said. We were going to start up our John Doe Club again, whether we saw you or not, weren't we, Bert? And there were a lot of others that were going to do the same thing. Well, Mr. Sourpuss even got a letter from his cousin in Toledo.
I got it right here, Mr. Doe.
Only it'd be a lot easier with you. Please. Please come with us, Mr. Doe.
Uncle John.
Mr. Doe. Here, we'll help you with it. She'll be all right.
Go take her right down to the car.
Little Beethoven to end things off. So that's the end of the film. The people have turned around again the right way. The people win over the corrupt millionaires and politicians. The elites tried unsuccessfully to exploit a populist movement. And the movement, which is a good thing, is for love and compassion. It's for Christian values on Christmas Eve. And Meet John Doe, in a nice way, leaves us with love. It leaves us with romantic love, of course. It's a movie. It celebrates love thy neighbor. The people ultimately turn away from the autocrats. John Doe finds his own voice. Capra is considered by many people now to be irredeemably corny. There was a wonderful phrase in Hollywood to describe Capra movies when they came out as another dish of Capricorn. But I think what he shows in this film, which is really a very complicated film that Riskin and Capra have created, is the fear of what can happen in a country, and that maybe there's a way around it. The ending might not be as credible as getting there, but in some ways it's a very hopeful film about a very stressed society. So I leave you with that, as I won't comment on its relevance, let you figure it out. But I leave you with that as a little bit about Meet John Doe. Thank you very much. We have a little time if you have any questions.
I think that my favorite line was when he said, "Don't wait until the game is called because of darkness."
Good baseball metaphors, yes, all the way through. Yeah.
Was Capra successful during his time as a director?
He asked if Capra was successful during his time as a filmmaker. Yes, during this period, but after the war, he never had success again. Now, of course, you could say It's a Wonderful Life is now watched by a gazillion people. It's even been turned into an opera. And I think that's a sign of the world we live in now, which is a fascinating world in which just about every movie ever made is available to us. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. You know, when I started teaching film, I carried around the 16 millimeter films and a projector to go into the classroom to show them the film before we could have the class on the film. But now, just to think that you could go onto YouTube or Prime and get just about any important film and a lot of unimportant films from all over the world. So our knowledge of movies can be far greater. And young people's knowledge of movies, if they're at all interested in them, is overwhelming because it's all there. It's all available to us. That's a good thing about the internet. But they can look back on Capra films, for instance, if they so chose. But yeah, I mean, during the 30s, he was very successful and then slid off afterward. And then got very unpopular in Hollywood when he testified for the House Un-American Activities Committee and named names. Anything else? Well, thank you very much.